Good morning, it's January 22nd. This is to my liberal friends. The dog ate my homework. I didn't do it, my brother did it. I don't know how that happened. And these are all the excuses that we've heard from our children or even from ourselves as we were growing up. It was never our fault. It was someone else that caused the problem. And this seems to be where Joe Biden has regressed as he begins his re-election campaign in earnest. And as I said last week, he does not have a favorable record to run on, so he has to attack his opponent, which is looking more and more like a rerun of 2020 with Biden facing off against Donald Trump. Now, both will have served 4 years as president. Both will have, in the eyes of their supporters, the advantage of incumbency. In 2020, we were still struggling with the pandemic, and Joe Biden hid in his basement and allowed his campaign to rely on media and surrogates. But that will not work in 2024, and he's trying to figure out how he's going to campaign. Since he cannot just hunker down in that basement, he has taken to lecturing the media about their failures to adequately, at least in his eyes, tell the public how great he and his policies have been. And to a degree, it's working because you're seeing more and more stories in the media about how we have avoided a recession and Biden's policies should be given the credit. But unfortunately for Joe, the public's not buying it. In a recent Harvard-Harris poll, Biden barely cracks the 40% approval rating, with over 58% disapproving of his job performance. That same poll told us that only 30% feel the country's on the right track. And poll after poll has shown that Trump is actually leading Biden with the voters. Biden's failed leadership has resulted in skyrocketing inflation, crippling interest rates, a humanitarian and national security crisis at our border, lawlessness in our streets, and endless wars through weakness. With just 10 months left in his presidency and no accomplishments to run on, Biden is desperately trying to flip the script and hide from his record of failures. But the jig is up. Americans are fed up, feeling less safe in their communities, watching the value of their hard-earned wages plummet as the cost of groceries rise. With nowhere to return, Biden has built a re-election campaign based on gaslighting and projection. Taking no accountability for his failed policies, Biden instead projects his failures onto his opponent, Donald Trump. The desperation of the Biden team couldn't be more glaring as we hear he and his media hacks on the news accused Donald Trump of being a, quote, threat to democracy. It's a hollow attack that is rich with hypocrisy when you take a closer look at President Biden's record. Biden understands that Trump has a devoted following, and so he's trying to use the legal system to take Trump out of the race. And according to the New York Times, not a friend of Donald Trump, they reported that Joe Biden told his inner circle that Trump should be prosecuted and Attorney General Merrick Garland needed to take some decisive action. The result has been a flurry of lawsuits filed so they would be in the news during the election year. Second, Biden supporters have moved in trying to remove Trump from ballots in states around the country. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear this case, and I strongly believe they will overturn the Colorado Supreme Court that ruled Trump could not be on the ballot. They will tell the unelected official in Maine that she has no authority to deny Trump's name on the ballot. And I suspect, at least I hope, this will be a 9-0 decision with even the 3 liberal women on the court, realizing this is not a real threat to democracy. And you can get that Biden will denounce the decision and disparage it by calling it a MAGA court. Stopping Americans from casting a vote for President Trump is the epitome of election interference and the antithesis of democracy. And make no mistake about it, these politically motivated attacks were designed and planned by the far left and directed by Joe Biden. Look no further than Biden's November 22 declaration when he said the quiet part out loud, vowing in a press conference that he would personally make sure Trump would not become president again. If Joe Biden is forced to run on his record, then this is what we would be seeing. On day one, President Biden reversed President Trump's successful border policies and upended our national security for an invasion of terrorists, Chinese nationals, and millions of illegal gotaways at our wide-open border who are now living right here in our heartland. I'd argue that erasing our borders for all practical purposes, allowing criminals into our country, and paying for their health care, housing, cell phones, and transportation to the tune of nearly $500 billion a year is a threat to our democracy. And does Joe Biden claim credit for what he has become a crisis on the border? No. He blames Donald Trump, even though there were nowhere near the number of illegal crossings during the Trump administration. It was Biden that canceled the Remain in Mexico policy that was actually working. But according to Biden, it's all Trump's fault. When asked about the White House concern for the national debt crisis, they doubled down, blaming none other than President Trump again. Unfortunately for the Biden administration, the facts are not on his side. It is President Biden's reckless inflationary spending that has added $10 billion per day to the national debt without a single reduction. A country unable to pay its debts, forced to borrow from adversarial nations like China, is a threat to our democracy. But we should not forget the attempts by Biden to limit even speech. His administration created a, quote, disinformation governance board, end quote, a dystopian program to give unelected government bureaucrats the authority to determine what the American people can say online in the name of national security. Is that democracy? Joe Biden will finally have to come out of his bunker and face the American people. He will eventually have to face Donald Trump on the debate stage, and the evidence now points to a disaster for Biden. He will be 82 years old, and he shows every year of his age. He's now shuffling while he walks. He's making more gaffes than normal and shows the signs of onset dementia. We all age differently. Some of us will retain our physical and mental faculties longer than others, but Biden is clearly not one of them. So instead of campaigning on a record that the American people have clearly rejected, he will blame everything on Trump and absolve himself of any responsibility. I don't think it's going to work. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.